So where do I even begin with this video? Take the best thing you've ever experienced. Take the one thing that is always there for you. Take your comfort place. Take whatever. You would love to experience that thing, whatever it may be, for the first time again, right? I mean, you would have to, otherwise it wouldn't be your favorite. Now just imagine, you could, but without having to forget your past experiences. This is how I feel about every new Monster Hunter game. Every single time they start the marketing phase of a new Monster Hunter, I am taken back to when I first experienced a Monster Hunter game in my life. I don't quite know what it is about this franchise, but it just has its hooks in me. So let me take you along while I explain what about this game makes me wish more people could see its brilliance and appreciate the people behind it like I and so many others already do. If you somehow managed to avoid this franchise for the 19 years it has existed, first of all, my condolences. And second of all, how? So, the cookie cutter description is Monster Hunter is an action RPG from Capcom where you hunt monsters large and small multiple times to get new armor and weapons only to go back and hunt even more dangerous monsters. But I don't think classifying it as an action RPG is right. I believe it needs to be classified in its own genre. A hunting game. You don't just get dropped into the game, fight the monster, upgrade something, and then go back to the next one. No. This is far more in depth. See, in a lot of games you would hunt dozens of minions and then eventually a boss, and then repeat that, but have the difficulty scaled up a little bit. Not so in Monster Hunter. In this game, you do hunt small monsters, but very infrequently. The most you will hunt them will be in the very beginning of the game, just so you can get comfortable with how the combat works. But once you get to your first large monster, you will most likely not hunt a small monster again, unless you choose to do so via an expedition or a small monster quest. So the boss monsters, quote unquote, in other games are just regular enemies in Monster Hunter. So with bosses in other games, if they're well designed that is, you have to remember attack patterns, phases, openings, etc. Now imagine that, but for 95% of the game. This may sound exhausting, and can be, but it is exhilarating more than anything. The game makes you dance with the monsters more than anything. You learn its moves, its patterns, and nowadays monsters also have ways to counter you by changing attack patterns depending on how close you are to them. So it is a give and take of attacks and punishments. After a hunt, be it successful or not, you return back to your village and probably even straight to the forge to check out the armor and weapons of the monster. And you may decide that Congalala ass would look amazing on your head, so you go out and hunt that Congalala again and again to get all the materials to make yourself a pretty Congalala ass hat. And then you go back out to check what the next monster is that you want to hunt, and you may even decide that, hey, this Plesioth dong looks better on your head than that Congalala ass. So you attempt to get that armor instead, and you repeat the same for the entire game. And you know what I would say to that?
Stop it. Get some help.
Same goes for the weapons, but we will get back to those later. Eventually though, you will get humbled, and you will return, but you will try and try again. And eventually you will succeed, and you will wear that Plesioth dong on your head, and you will wear it with pride. And then you will see a monster that is so huge, so intimidating, that you might wonder how you're even supposed to beat it. But trust me, you will. Maybe not on the first try, maybe not on the second, but with enough practice, you will.
If that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights?
So Monster Hunter isn't actually known for its stories. The last two games have made some effort to have a more presentable story, but most of the stories in Monster Hunter are pretty cookie cutter, which usually goes like this. You're a novice hunter that recently either just arrived in a village or actually came from the village itself. You are to investigate some recent issues that have arisen within the area. This will then lead you to find your rival, which is usually the flagship monster of the game, and depending on which Monster Hunter game you're currently playing, it will either send you back to the village, making you hunt other monsters first before going back to it, which is what will usually happen in the old games, or if you're playing the new games, you will hunt it down right then and there, only to then realize that the monster you just hunted, again, depending on which game you're playing, is either not even the cause of the issues, or it is only part of the cause of the issues, which then leads you to investigate what the actual cause is. Therefore, you hunt new monsters in new locales to track down where the issue actually stems from, only to then find out that the actual perpetrator is an elder dragon that you haven't met before. This usually is the end of the storyline of the game. In the newer games, the story is also continued on in the guild quests, which is, again, new. The guild quests usually also have their own storylines, especially if you buy an expansion, as the game kind of has to shepherd you through the new areas and the new monsters somehow, so they add a new storyline to get you to actually do those things. This then, again, repeats the same story beats as in the village story, where you hunt an apparent issue, realize it is not the actual issue, and then go hunt the actual issue at the very end. This can range from Malzeno and Geismagorm to Velstrax and Utlol-Ka, I think. This kind of story structure is present in every game and every expansion, without fail. And at times the pretense for hunting monsters is even less dire or personal, as in games like Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, you would just hunt the monsters to research them. The game is also pretty lighthearted. Your partners... No, not these. Get them off the screen. Better. Okay. Your partners that will stay by your side are these cute little kitties of doom called palicos. They are comic relief in cutscenes, de-stressors in times of low or no action with their cute little antics, and they pretty much take care of various different tasks, all things from farming to researching, but most of the time you will see them be cooks or, well, your aides in hunts. The hunts themselves are also taken with joy, as they are rarely dire tasks and seen as an honor to be taken. Well, unless the straits are actually dire, like, for example, the quest to hunt a dire Moralis, which is the reason why an entire part of the sea is devoid of life, and now stained with the blood of the dead sea life, as dire Moralis is a living, moving, gargantuan volcano. Though I would be lying if this game was only about hunting monsters. Sure, it's in the title, but there are so many more systems in the game that demand your attention. So let me tell you about them.
You alright?
Don't get it.
It's alright.
Don't worry about it.
There are a crap load of systems in this game, reaching from armor skills, to melding, to hit zones, to food buffs, to sharpness level, to the current game's gimmick, to whatever the fuck. And each one of these systems is so in-depth that you can just take one of these systems and pop them into a different game, and it will be the entire system for that entire game. And figuring out just one of these systems is such a great feeling that you will fall in love with all of them once you eventually figure them all out. This isn't just, for example, with the skills, this isn't just like Ubisoft, where you have a 2% increase in fart strength. No, there's actually tangible differences whenever you activate a skill. Sure, there still are skills that give you a 2% increase in fart strength, but you will actually notice those 2%. And I'm sure there are systems that I haven't spoken of, such as the farm. But if I did speak about the farm, we would be here by tomorrow, and I don't want that. But let me tell you about two of the easier to explain systems in the game. The skill system and the sharpness system. So, the sharpness system is quite simple in that it lets you get through body parts that you otherwise would just bounce off of, the higher your sharpness level is. And the higher your sharpness level is, the more of a damage boost you get. So let's say with blue sharpness you have a 1.1 X damage boost. On the other hand, with purple sharpness, you could have a damage boost of 1.3x, and you can get through body parts that you otherwise couldn't get through. Skills in these games are so strong that even changing out one skill can take a 15-minute hunt and turn it into a 10-minute hunt. And even if you understand two of these systems fully, you will grow to love the rest of the systems as well. Of course, after you understand them. And you know what else you will grow to understand and love?
This is my world! My world!
So, the world of Monster Hunter is a very unique one, in my opinion. I will start this section off by saying that if you want a more in-depth look at the world of Monster Hunter, I highly recommend Ocean's video. I will link his channel, and specifically the video, in the description below. And he's a YouTuber I personally enjoy quite a lot, so I hope that you will enjoy him as well. Either way, let's get back into it. So, the world in Monster Hunter is a post-apocalyptic one, a thing that not many people know. See, in the past, there was the ancient civilization. A civilization so technically advanced they had their own machine soldiers and even created their own life out of dead dragons. This was known as the Forbidden Act, and the canonicity of that specific act is questionable, but let's just go with it. This caused a dragon to decide that humanity and humanoids are cringe and should no longer exist. So he just went around and caused the apocalypse, destroying everything and melting everyone along his path. This sent everyone back to the Stone Age. And this is where current Monster Hunter is set. Humanity and humanoids now live in a society that reveres nature and tries to live in harmony with it rather than just exploiting it like the ancient civilization did. And this is also where the Hunters Guild comes in. The Hunters Guild is an organization that spans across the entire old and now new world and manages the affairs of hunters inside and outside of the safe areas. This involves research, exploration, and protection, which in rare cases also means extermination of a particularly troublesome monster. Those who do still try to exploit nature are hunted down by guild knights and possibly even executed for poaching or other various kinds of exploitation of nature. Yeah, in this world you should not fucking litter. The continents in which most games take place in are collectively simply called the Old World. There are other places, such as the New World, which has so far only appeared in Monster Hunter World and seems to be like the equivalent of Australia. Aya, a continent that was deemed too dangerous to explore, which makes you wonder what the fuck is going on down there. As well as Fondron, a continent that harbors a load of dangerous and rare monster species. Oh, and of course the Northern Polar region, which is made up of smaller regions that I'll just lump together for brevity's sake. All these continents don't just have different names for the sake of it. No, the devs actually went to great lengths to give each area their own identity. I remember that at one point during Monster Hunter World's development, the developers even flew out to a different continent just to get some pictures of plants to make them look more accurate to the area that they wanted to create in the game. There's also this one story where the developers were asked for feedback on that horrible Monster Hunter movie and only really cared about the monster designs rather than anything else, which was the reason they were actually asked for, which just goes to show how much these developers care about the game. Another thing that will make you feel more attached to this world is the fact that you will explore with your allies together. So whenever you find a new monster in a new area, or you discover what actually is causing the issues, or when you discover that sweet, supple Congalala ass, you will do it with your allies. And speaking of discovery, it is also pretty interesting that most of the civilians in this game will never meet the monsters. See, the villages that you always operate in the games are fringe towns, far out from the safe areas in this world. So Joe over here will never see a monster in his life, unless Lao Shanlang comes a knock-in, which happens pretty rarely. The only people that will actually see the monsters on a regular basis are those villagers in those fringe towns. They will be the only ones who see hunters as protectors, alongside the guild. The regular civilian who lives in the safe cities will just see hunters as brutes swinging around huge, cumbersome weapons. So let's talk about them.
That's it. I'm getting me mallet.
As a sane person, you would think that hunters would engage these giant, nightmarish creatures from a distance, right? Well, some of them do, but those are few and far between. Most hunters are like angry little cats. They will grab a sword or a hammer and just run at the monster. So, when you think about hunting the dragon that caused the apocalypse, which weapon would you use? Well, I have a few options for you. There are 14 different weapon types with, what is that? Entirely unique movesets and even their own buffs and skills that may even have a second form with even more moves? Well, here are some of those options. So, first of all, we have the longsword. Your all-rounder weapon. It is pretty much good at everything and bad at nothing. It also includes knocking over your teammates when it is least convenient. So the longsword works like this. You essentially hit the monster until a bar fills up, and then you use a button to unleash special attacks that use that bar as fuel. And if you hit all of those attacks, you will gain a temporary damage bonus. And these damage bonuses stack up to, I think, 3 times. And it also just allows you to parry almost everything, which gave it the moniker of being one of the most overused weapons by everyone from noobs to tryhard at the same time. As why would you use any of the other weapons if you can just not take any damage and deal out some of the highest damage in the game? Then you have weapons like the sword and shield. The starter weapon that most people ignore, me included, even though it can be one of the deadliest weapons in the game. It has tons of weapons, and you can use items even with your weapon drawn, which is a thing that other weapons can't do. It is fast, it has a shield, and it can even knock enemies out, which most of the other bladed weapons can't. Then you have, for example, the charge blade, and all community jokes aside, this weapon is not all that complicated. It's either that or I'm way too fucking stupid to fully understand this weapon, and so have made myself think that it is not that hard to use. It is essentially a mix of sword and shield and an axe. See, you can attach the shield, which is also bladed, to the tip of the sword and transform it into an axe. That axe then has something called files that either carry elemental damage or knockout damage. And you can attach those to monsters, but if weapons that get up close and personal to monsters is too dangerous for you, then I have 3 weapon types that let you fight the monster from a distance. Those 3 weapon types being the bow, the light bowgun, and the heavy bowgun. The major difference between the bow, light, and heavy bowgun are that the bow has unlimited ammo and requires you to manage your stamina, while the light and heavy bowgun do require ammo, but don't require any stamina from you. The difference between the light and heavy bowgun being that the light bowgun is used for more status effects, and the heavy bowgun for more raw damage. And I wouldn't go even deeper into them, but I realize I'm stupid, so I don't want to embarrass myself too much, so I want to just move on, you know. And move on we do to my favorite weapon in the game, the hammer, which requires none of that stupid meter management from the other weapons, or ammo types, or stamina conservation. No. Why make things difficult if you could just act like a chimp with a big ass stick and spin to win on top of some monsters? There are of course some other weapons such as the greatsword, dual blades, insect glaive, lance, gun lance, hunting horn, switch axe, and some other weapons that aren't present in the mainline games. But one thing that is great about all of these weapon types is that, again, they have different movesets. All of them. Each one of these weapons could be used in a different game and could be the entire weapon system in that game. And you have 14 of them in this game. Another great thing about the weapons in this game is that they're all viable. There's not one bad weapon, it's just you need to figure out how to properly use them. And aside from the weapons in this game, you will have other tools such as traps, flash bombs, sonic bombs, barrel bombs, large barrel bombs, mega barrel bombs, so many bombs, or status altering items, or team healing items, or whatever else there is in this game. There's too much to list. It gives you a wide variety of things you can do to approach a hunt, which is very unique in the gaming space, in my opinion. Another unique thing is that lately each new game in the series has had its own gimmick or gimmick tool. So for example in World you had the Clutch Claw, which allowed you to weaken body parts of enemies as well as smacking them around. And in Rise, which is the most recent game, you have wire bugs, which let you parkour through the air or use some special attacks that you otherwise couldn't. And of course there's some rare cases where you get to use the big guns, which includes the Dragonator or the Explosive Dragonator, which are both just giant unbreakable spears, one of which can explode, or the Splitting Wyvern Shot, which is just a pocket-sized nuke that you can launch at a small group of enemies and have them all incinerate. These weapons were built using blueprints of the ancient civilization, as humanoids used to essentially be at the zenith of the world. So these weapons are obviously devastating to anything they're directed towards, which is usually elder dragons, or in the case of the Splitting Wyvern Shot, also smaller groups of large monsters. But you might be wondering, so which of all these dragons are elder dragons? Well, let me enlighten you.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
So, first of all, there are barely any actual dragons in this world. The developers made the conscious choice of not using dragons, but wyverns as the base of Monster Hunter. The difference being that dragons usually have 6 limbs, with some exceptions here and there, and wyverns having 4 or less limbs. While wyverns are the largest group of monsters you will meet in this world, there are also fanged beasts, which are usually mammals, apes and shit. Then there are leviathans, amphibians, carapaceons, which are crabs and stuff, as well as various bugs such as neopterons or temnocerans, the former being actual bugs, and the latter being various arachnids. Fuck yes, I got this in the first try. Wyverns specifically have a lot of subsections, such as piscine wyverns, fanged wyverns, brute wyverns, snake wyverns, and so on and so forth. There's a ton of wyverns in this world. These subsections usually share movesets in the gameplay, in a specific subsection with some unique moves sprinkled in for the specific monster. On the other hand, elder dragons don't really have a unifying set of characteristics like wyverns or beasts or whatever. They can all vary from your classic dragon in Fatalis to a unicorn in Kirin, or a gigantic snake in Dalmador. Take Geogmatius, for example, a giant dragon covered in an explosive tar that is attracted to explosive material so you can eat it. Not only is it so large it can crush walls with ease, but it has explosive tar covering its body and spews that same explosive tar in gigantic beams. And on the other hand, you have Kirin, which is a peaceful elder dragon that causes lightning storms by just existing in the general area, which is why it usually needs to be repelled or killed. Like, have you ever seen a game that has this many different species of monsters with unique designs and so much care put into them? Hell, the dev team even added subspecies that look different. While in the past some of those subspecies were pretty much just recolors, in more recent games the subspecies have gone deeper to actually have their differences be bigger and be more adapted and in line with the area they reside in. So take for example Glavenus. He is a giant Carnotaur-like brute wyvern that uses its tail and its flame breath to rush you down and cut you into shreds. That monster recently in Monster Hunter World got a subspecies called Acidic Glavenus, which resides in the Rotten Vale, which caused it to adapt a thinner tail to be able to maneuver better in that environment, as well as an acidic liquid, which causes your armor to corrode and give you the defense down ailment. And now add to that variants and rare species. The amount of variety on display here is really something. And I mean, have you ever thought that a praying mantis might be dangerous to you? Well, look at Lolka and think again. And as I had mentioned before, the battles in this game are dances with monsters, not just slugfests like in most games. It is a constant give and take between you and the monster. Some of their moves even betray their personalities. For example, Zenogre, when he walks around you, he walks with a very self-confident strut, showing that he doesn't take you seriously, which he will then quickly regret. And man, I have hinted at it before, but I need to talk about how great these devs are. Monster Hunter has kept Capcom alive in the past when they weren't the best at gaming output quality. It was the one game that always pleased its fans and never lost quality, and that is in my opinion because the dev team always cared for Monster Hunter. They always added free content, crossovers, and of course more high quality games to the series. And in more recent times they have kept that tradition up, which means more crossovers, more transparency, and more free content. Sure, there have been some duds. For example, Monster Hunter Rise. Lord knows if you follow me on Twitter, you see how much I ranted about that game in the past. But even then, they don't just abandon games, they work on them and try to improve them so that everybody likes them in the end. And even if I do think that Monster Hunter Rise is a worse Monster Hunter game, that still means it's a good game and puts it above many other games in today's industry. Many games have tried doing what Monster Hunter did, and most if not all have failed. To name two off the top of my head that have failed are Dauntless and sadly Wild Hearts. While Dauntless felt like it never even got close to what Monster Hunter tried to do, Wild Hearts got unimaginably close, which makes it failing so much more tragic, as it wasn't a bad game, but rather a game with lacking balancing and bad Monster Hunter design. So yeah, Monster Hunter still stands as the peak of the hunting game genre, and for all these reasons, Monster Hunter will forever be my favorite game franchise in the industry. And man, have you heard Yosti? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This one took me a bit longer than I had hoped, because this is the second version of the script. I actually tried to go off at the top of my head more than usual, since, but honestly, I felt like the script was very dry, so I re-recorded this entire thing and made some changes more off of the top of my head rather than just strictly reading from the script. But oh well, it's done. I am way more happy with this version than the first one, so yeah. And yeah, finally, Monster Hunter Rise, all the updates are finished. Now we can start with the hype train for Monster Hunter 6. Man, I cannot wait for that. I might even live stream the reveal, even if it forces me to stay up until 6 AM or whatever. I will do that. God, I cannot wait for that game.